can.
Morning, Martin. Just me and you this morning, bro.
It is just me and you. That'll thrill people, won't it?
It's the Bearded Men's podcast. I think Alex has got a work meeting in London, and I didn't know what David's excuse was, but he's probably just busy somehow.
Yeah.
So the reason why we're so late is we were having a chat before we came on, and you gave me a bit of news which I'm quite flabbergasted by. Do you want to tell the audience what you found out? It's in the national press as well, but
Well, yeah, I was sent it by one of the people that watches this podcast, Richard Tomlinson. Basically, that Ian Sollom has been referred to the police for election spending. It looks like on the surface, it looks like he overspent massively during the election.
By a few quid, what was it, 100 quid, 200 quid? Because when you do your election expenses, it's a pain in the arse. Yeah, you have to go back through and you have to account for every single penny you spend or any money anybody spends on your behalf. Yeah, and it's quite a stressful thing making sure you put everything. So, is it going over £1,000 over?
Oh, it's I think it's 50. It's a huge, yeah.
50 grand then over the election expenses. So what was the spending limit for this election was it about 20 grand? I think.
Yeah, it's normally 20,000, isn't it, for members of parliament?
It changes to spend on the so it's per elector, so it changes per.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and so it was about £20,000. You told me this morning that mine says £10,800, which I've tried to forget because that's a lot of money to waste on getting less than 6,000 votes.
Well, the door's opening for you again. The door's opening for you again, maybe.
Well, now we know the reason why I only got 6,000 votes, because Ian Sollom spent 5 times as much as I did and 30 grand over the limit, allegedly.
Allegedly. And I have to say, my gut instinct is there are two things about this. My gut instinct is, there's a comment in here that says, I guess it was on leaflets. So many leaflets. Yeah. My gut instinct is that somebody's cocked up is the reality. But I'm a bit uneasy with that because you would have thought that before this got sent to the police to investigate, there would have been a bit of before it was sent to the police to investigate, you would have thought somebody somewhere was going back to them and saying, "Are you sure this is right?"
But part I guess part of the problem is, of course, is you don't see your election expenses. You have is it 60 days after the election to file them? And all right. So somebody might have made a cock up, but come on, you're competing so if I'd have made a cock up and gone over my limit, because I'm the one, I don't have an agent, I'm doing my own expenses, and basically, it's a difficult thing to do and you can make mistakes. So if I'd gone over my limit, I didn't. I spent half the amount I could have spent or I was allowed to spend. It might have been acceptable, but this is
allowed by who is the question I want to ask about that.
Yeah, that's true. I'm glad my wife doesn't listen to this. Otherwise, we want to have interesting conversations about the state of the house and necessary repairs. So this is a big political party, with experienced agents, and it's basically, Ian will probably say it's not his job to do it; it's his agent's job to do it. But Ian has to sign them off.
He's a candidate ultimately.
And so that there is no doubt at all. Anybody who lives, I don't know across the whole constituency because I think St Neots was especially targeted, but anybody, there was a joke. People were getting pissed off by the number of leaflets they got from Ian Sollom during the campaign. And so, and seriously, talking to somebody who, put my own resources on the line, because I got most of that money was my own money. There was I think maybe about 1,500 or £2,000 worth. No, 2 grand's worth of donations. So basically, it's talking about £8,000 of my own money to get my ass kicked. Like that changes the outcome, doesn't it? Now, it doesn't mean I would have won. Clearly, I wouldn't. I'm not going to say I would have won if it hadn't been this, but it changes the outcome of the election if you're spending, more than double what everybody else is doing.
It was always a close seat, and that's one of the issues. If he overspent, it's impossible to argue that he. I've lost you just a second. There you go. Sorry, it's impossible to say that this didn't affect the outcome. So if he has and is found to have overspent, there's a potential for a by-election to be called, and that potentially opens the door for Anthony Brown again if he wants to. Wants to stand. I mean that's but certainly it's really, really hard to sit and look at this and say it didn't make an impact. And straight away, first comment we get, today is so many leaflets. And so from that perspective, you're sitting and looking at this and thinking, was there more to this? And, let's see what comes of it. But it's another example of, what is increasingly politics just dragging itself down into the mire, and I find that I find where politics is. That's why my radio show is called Better Politics, because that's what I'm trying to encourage. I'm trying to encourage people to engage in politics more, but also to develop understanding and to try and get rid of negative campaigning as well, which some of it is essential. But the extent to which people campaign negatively nowadays, I think, is dreadful. And but also throwing leaflet after leaflet after leaflet out. It makes me very, very uneasy.
So we'll just move on to that in a minute, and some of the negativity around the mayoral campaign, which is not particularly fun. But I just want to say, so absolutely, as a candidate in that election, if these claims are true, which they seem quite likely to be, it's difficult to make an error of that magnitude. If these claims are true, then absolutely that election has to be rerun. I'm not sure that he should be allowed to be a candidate again, because here's the thing, he's already spent that money. That literally is always going. That's already influenced the result. He might not get the positive influence now, but people's opinions have been formed by that. Literally, you can't take it away. And what I also think is that there were other candidates in that election, including me. I won't be able to stand again because that was my one shot at doing it, because that's all the money I could afford to put into it. And so. I mean, I would seriously consider, I don't know what the precedent for this is, I would seriously consider suing him for I don't know if you can do it, but I've lost out because I can't afford to rerun an election, spend another £10,000. So all that money I spent during the election is utterly, utterly wasted. And so I would personally consider taking legal action. If that's, I mean, I haven't talked to him. I've just found out this morning. But if that's an avenue that's open, I just think that's absolutely disgraceful. And there's no amount of mixed dog at my homework, mistake excuses that justifies that.
Yeah, I don't know what options are open. I do know I'm pretty sure we've had by-elections as a result of election spending issues in the past, and you can't. From a if I was a Lib Dem and this went to a by-election, I think the one thing I would say categorically is I wouldn't want this geezer as a candidate, because I mean, the very nature of what has gone on would mean, if he is found wanting, that he's tainted. So I doubt he would be a candidate again if it happened. But that's for the Lib Dems to decide, isn't it? And if he's eligible as well. But I suspect somewhere in the middle of this, something will get worked out, because to put in your election expenses and be that far over the top suggests to me somebody's done something wrong, because they normally wangle it and make it so that they're under the limit, but by central party spending and stuff like that as well. So we'll see how it works out.
It would be it's so obvious, yeah. And like I've not done well, I've stood for other elections before, and the process is the same. But it's the first time. I mean, I'm my own agent, yeah. I've got no experience doing this, and you go through, and there's a bloody spreadsheet you fill in, yeah, where you have to record all your expenses, yeah. I suspect it's not. And there's other stuff where like if you've got people running around giving leaflets and they're spending money on petrol and stuff, you're supposed to declare all that stuff as well. Yeah, or if you've got people come in to support you and you have to pay for hotels and stuff, that has to be declared. Yeah, but it's almost certain that the majority of that money is going to be spent on their leafleting campaign because it didn't do anything else. Yeah, right. It was leaflet after leaflet after leaflet, and it would be and that's the first page in the spreadsheet, and it would be very, very obvious to anybody if it's gone over the top. I wonder if there might be a grey area to do with when the actual election. So there's a spending limit inside the election campaign, yeah. And Alex is a much better person to talk about this than I, because I don't really understand. But some of the money you spend just before the election campaign, I would suspect that the money they were pumping into St Neots before the election was announced, yeah, might be something to do with this. And maybe somebody's asked for extra scrutiny on their results and found extra spending. I don't know. We're just speculating.
Yeah, but, I mean, it could be that. It could be that there was some spending that they did during the election campaign that they had to declare that they planned to spend before, because the timing of that, getting leaflets out just before the election period kicks in proper. I think we've all done that as candidates. I did it when I stood as an independent last year, not as successfully as you, to be fair. But so all that kicks into it. But it's one of the things for me about all this stuff, and I felt this about election expenses at parliamentary level for a long, long time, and it is that the way the political parties behave in this is not to take the rules and say, we're going to abide by the rules. What they do is take the rules and then they go through and they examine every single way they can manipulate it. Yeah. What is it we can move away from local campaigning and into central party campaigning? And, we saw this before it was when I think there was a by-election called as a result of this. It was because the Conservatives were declaring the battle bus that what was then Conservative Future had during the campaign. They were counting that as central spending because these guys were staying in hotels and stuff, and it should have been local spending. I'm sure that was something a few years ago. And it's that sort of stuff where what you're doing is not saying this is the limit. Let's stick within the law. Let's be clear within the law. What we'll do is stretch the facts and test it and just see where we can manipulate it. And it's all that. And it's all another example of how politics has got very, very seedy. It's quite clear to me. You stick within the law and you clearly and visibly stick within the law, and then it's easy, isn't it?
Yeah. So I said earlier that I spent a load of money and got 6,000 votes. I'm just looking at the election result. I got less than 3,000. Yeah, which is pathetic. But so Ian got 19,500 votes, and Nancy Brown got nearly 15,000 votes. Now, in terms of the pounds per vote, yeah, that he spent campaigning, yeah, I mean, man, it's off. I think it's really quite serious. We should probably move on because I'll just bitch about this all day. But that's a really interesting bit of news. It's actually cheered me up a bit because
there is life after podcasts, so you're going to be going to work and you're going to be moaning all day at work.
No, it almost makes me feel a bit better because I can use it as post hoc rationalisation to justify my incredibly crap performance in that election. Right. So in terms of negative campaigning, then as well, there's been a lot flying around this week, isn't it? So when you were off on your holiday, which I don't want to talk about, that I think the last time I wasn't on last week, but I raised somebody on Twitter had raised a question that Anna Smith had put some bar charts on the some bar charts, some dodgy bar charts on her leaflets, which I agree, were a misrepresentation of the previous election result, which was like a single transferable vote kind of thing, wasn't it? And it wasn't first past the post. And Naomi's put something in the comments which I'm going to talk about and go back to in a second. But and I agree that was negative. But I also said there was a thing saying that on that leaflet, other thing I picked up on that leaflet, and I was only glancing at it, is that saying Paul Bristow doesn't even live in in Peterborough or in the combined authority area and lives in St Albans, which I thought was quite funny. Yeah, but Paul Bristow has come out to reply to that point, hasn't he? Quite vocally and quite forcefully on social media.
Yeah, and I think if I was Paul in those circumstances, I think I would have done the same. I have to say, the strength with which they are campaigning on that issue has surprised me, I think it's unfortunate. Is the way I put it. I'm getting really wound up about negative campaigning at the moment, and I think that's particularly bad. And let's be fair, all candidates are capable of it, and part of Paul's campaign has been very, very negative, but this is quite personal as well. I suspect Anna didn't know how personal it was when the leaflet went out, or whoever designed the leaflet, and how personal it was. But I think it's a mistake, and the trouble is, a lot of people will have seen it, and a lot of those people won't have seen what Paul's put out in defence of it. You know, and that's a reality.
So I do think that candidates coming from outside the area, is a legitimate criticism. Particularly in the general election campaign. Again, a big thing in the St Midcams election was that their Labour candidate we had come from South London somewhere, or East London somewhere, and had never been to, she was an urban Labour councillor, had never been to semi-rural Cambridgeshire or done anything here, and that, I mean, you can do it. She wasn't trying to hide that, I don't think, and that's it happens, and quite often you get good candidates. So I think that Ben Abisi-Jekti, who won the Huntingdon election, he's not from here originally, he's from London, but he's made his home here, and that's as much as you can do, isn't it? And you can even say, Alex stood in this constituency, she moved here quite a long time before, but she came here, I think, with the aim of winning this election. And so moving to an area and being part of an area, that's not a negative thing. I think if you're completely outside the area and you have no intention of moving here, I think that's negative. But I think in Paul's case, to be fair to him, he had a place to be near his kids because he's divorced, and like most fathers or separated parents, tries to split his week trying to see as much of his kids as possible and hold down a job. And having spent at least 10 years of my life driving 150-mile round trips to see my son every couple of weeks, I can completely get that. And those kind of family politics shouldn't really be part of an election campaign, should they? Because clearly they're trying to get those kids.
I suspect that when that leaflet went out, they weren't aware of those circumstances. But even so, there's a lot that Anna's, can fight on in this election. The fact that she's chaired the committee that has overseen some of the most important things that the combined authority sort of has done. It is something that I would absolutely major on, but. And so I don't think she needed to do that. And what I hope is during this campaign, as a result of this, when people are thinking about putting out stuff like this, that they'll think twice, because people of Cambridgeshire deserve better. This is the single most important political post in Cambridgeshire now. We need a campaign that reflects that.
Yeah, it's not got off to a great start, has it? It really hasn't.
No.
Yeah.
I've been critical of Paul for the amount of negative campaigning he's done as well, and I have to say he's switching that a little bit. He's talking a lot more about what he wants to do and what he wants to achieve as mayor. Some of that's open to scrutiny because there are a lot of very broad brush statements that sort of need more information. So, as an example, he's promised to dual all major A roads. I have to declare an interest here. I live on the A605. If anybody wanted to propose to dual the A605, I'd be in uproar.
Yeah.
And you can't deny it's not a major A road.
So yeah, I would agree. So on negative campaigning, I think it comes back to bite you in the arse largely, isn't it? Especially if you're making untrue campaigns, and it's not statesmanlike, and it's not becoming of anybody to do those kind of things. I will say when the Conservatives, some of the local Conservatives around here are complaining about the Paul Bristow thing, they did put out a leaflet about me this week, basically saying that I don't live. So I've got a county council division where I do live, which is St Neots East and Great Gransden, which is a largely rural division. I've got lots and lots of villages. When I stood for district, I wanted to be involved with the kind of St Neots redevelopment work, and so I stood across the border in St Neots Priory Park, which is literally 0.4 of a mile away from my house, less than half a mile away from my house. It's across the railway track. I live on the borders of it, and so, but they put out a leaflet this week saying that I'd done a chicken run. So it was the shortest ever chicken run. Half a mile. Basically, also so I could get myself more parish council meetings to attend as well, because I didn't have enough already. But I'm like,
my chicken run was shorter than yours, by the way, because the ward I stood in as an independent last year. It starts one door down from my house. I mean, I've had an issue yesterday with a councillor, and it's Hackney Waz. He's a councillor in Whittlesea, and he's a county council candidate. And he put something on Facebook that basically said that Sir Harry Smith Community College had been banded as well below average by Ofsted. That's the phrase that he used.
Well below average.
Well below average. That's what he said. If anybody knows anything about Ofsted, and bearing in mind, I was cabinet member for children for a long time, and I still keep an eye on, close eye on education. Ofsted don't have a band of well below average. And so the impression that creates is Ofsted have been to the school, they've had a good look round, they've done their inspection, and they've written a report, and it says well below average. That's the impression that post gives. What it actually is a reflection of a thing called Progress 8 data, which is done by government and not Ofsted, and he didn't understand the difference between those two things. And it's on the .gov.uk element of the website, not on Ofsted's, and where they take the Progress 8 data and they run it through a machine, and the data comes out and says not good enough, well below average. And it's two completely different things. And he really did not like the challenge, and I decided in the end, because of the his reaction to the challenge that I made, that I put a conduct complaint in against him.
Absolutely.
Because from my perspective, he uses that Facebook page to do a lot of stuff about some of the things he's done as a councillor, and he's done some good things. The work he did to try and safeguard Station Road Wreck in Whittlesea was really good. But this was really misleading, and the reaction to it, just meant I put in a conduct complaint, because, it's disrespectful to the school, it's disrespectful to the staff, it's disrespectful to a lot, anybody that's involved in that school. And it's not to say there aren't issues. Of course, every school's got issues, but let's be accurate. Let's set things into context, and let's not do things that mislead. Or when it's pointed out that you've got it wrong, do something about it. And when he posted it on another website, on another Facebook group last night, immediately somebody I know who's a teacher posted and said, "This isn't Ofsted." And I posted and said, I'd forget about it if I were you. He doesn't know the difference between Ofsted and gov.uk. And he described my comment as imbecilic.
Terrible. Well, and for the avoidance of doubt, I just Googled it, but Sir Harry Smith Community College has a good Ofsted, and has been good, I think, since it converted to an academy 13 years ago. So
it has, to be fair, it had a short Ofsted last year that raised some concerns and said it probably wouldn't be graded as good if it had a full inspection.
But then it did have one in February. Oh, is that what it said? No, school inspection.
Basically, But that's fine. And schools go through those phases. And the important thing about all of that stuff is it's really hard for the school to come back and comment.
Yeah.
And if you want to be a community leader, and he's supposed to be a community leader, your job is not to set the wrong hares running in your community.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in that. You know, we've had some issues around here with Longsands and Ernoff.
I remember, yeah.
All those schools, and I've been critical of schools when they didn't get good Ofsteds and parents were complaining. But equally, when they do get good Ofsteds, and you have to celebrate them, don't you? And you have to try and support them through the difficult times. Because the thing is, you don't have much of a choice, do you? Because these are academy trusts. Yeah, you can't get rid of them, or it's very difficult to get rid of them, especially if they've got decent or good Ofsteds. And so the best you can do is to work with the school to do it better. Obviously, hold them to account. Like, that's why I missed the days of being a school governor, where it was about being a critical friend. That's actually what you need from councillors. But generally, you need to be supporting yourself, unless they don't deserve it.
Great councillors are great critical friends. That's my view, and I've always felt that way. And there is a correlation. I was a school governor for a long time, and a chair of governors for a long time, and I've really enjoyed it. But one of the things, he's putting this out when the school's on a bit of a high, because they've just put on they've just put Frozen on the school for the last few days, and apparently it's been fantastic. And for somebody like a head teacher to know that's gone on, be really proud of your school, and then they see the sort of drivel that Hack put on is what it is. And I just want to say, I do my radio show. I've invited Hack onto my radio show when he's made mistakes in the past and got things wrong, and I've invited him to be interviewed, and he's refused. On the basis that I'm a community activist, I'm not a media man. And I don't think this is anything deliberate, but it's even more worrying because it's not deliberate.
Yeah.
And you should do something about it when it's pointed out to you.
Yeah, you might be saying nice things about Frozen, yeah, but for full declaration, you hid 2 Frozen dresses from the back of your office at the start of this. That's the reason we were wait, because Martin was hiding his Frozen dresses. I don't think they're going to fit, mate. I'm not, they're looking.
Well, they definitely won't fit me. That's because I have my granddaughter coming from Dubai tomorrow. So she shares this room.
So on the radio thing, when I was first elected as a councillor, and I was quite shy. I'm quite a shy person, which is quite surprising. But I challenged myself when I was first elected. If I was interviewed to go on the media, I would always try to go on. Yeah, and I've been on a BBC Breakfast and Black Cat Radio. BBC Breakfast, Cambridgeshire Breakfast and Black Cat Radio like hundreds of times now, and I always go on, no matter how difficult the question is. I've only ever turned down 2 or 3 interviews. One, when I went on the first time, it was about a specific piece of casework, and I think the BBC were just not they weren't listening to what I was saying. It was just like a stitch-up job, and I was advised not to go on the second time, and I didn't, because I think they treated me awfully, because I went back and admitted responsibility for stuff, and then they were just trying to pile into me, so I didn't go back at that. Once was this week when somebody from Dan Mason from a local radio station asked me to go and talk about the Chancellor's Spring Statement. I'm like, I don't even know what it is. I'm not qualified to talk about national politics, which is probably why I only got 3,000 votes in the election. Not that I'm dwelling on that. There was a message from.
You run yourself down about that, dude. By the way,
yeah,
you just should, but yeah.
So Naomi is I'm going to say she's the Green leader at Cambridge City Council, but she's a prominent Green in the region. I've never met Naomi, and to be fair, she's offered to go out for coffee with me at least 3 times recently, and I haven't got back to her. And that's not because I really want to go out with you, Naomi, and go for a coffee, because she's always been really, really kind to me. But so she's talking about in the same election, but in general. So Catherine Fisher stood against me for the Greens, who was by far the best candidate at Hustings. Yeah, she was fantastic, but Catherine was having to raise funds during the election so she could put out an extra leaflet. I'll have to go back and see how much they spent. I suspect they probably spent less than me. And so the Greens do a really good job of, like, nationally, like lots of political parties these days, targeting where they want to win seats, and you don't end up spending party money in places like St Neots and Mid Cambridge, which you've got no chance of winning. You spend it where you can win, which is a sensible thing to do. But I'm going to have I will message you after this, Naomi, and we should get together and talk about what we're going to do about this, because I think I got a few more votes than Catherine, who was fantastic, really, really fantastic to see her again. But I mean, it's the same thing as they put their resources into a campaign, yeah. on peanuts, and then you get steamrolled by a political party with a massive bank balance who's spending allegedly spending well over the.
That's what you need to understand as an independent. It's less so for the Greens, but to a certain extent, it's true because they're a minor party. Sorry, Naomi, but that is the perception, and I think it's how they're legally classified as well. But you're dealing with these party machines that can throw as much money as they like, allegedly with the Lib Dems a lot more than they should. On these election campaigns, they've got a really, really high media profile as well. They're taking up effectively. If you're a major party, a third of the news. During a third of the political news during an election campaign, that party is, and to try and campaign against that and compete against that as an independent is so difficult. So, you shouldn't run yourself down, but anybody that's not one of the major parties is struggling, and a lot of major party candidates during the elections. If you're in a seat that's not going to be won, you're also struggling as well. To find funds. When I stood in Nottingham North in 2010, I was. There was a couple of target seats for the Conservatives, and they and so loads and loads of resources going into them, and I was scrabbling around for literature and information. What I was actually doing was going into the office every day and looking at the central party literature that wasn't constituency focused, and saying, is this going to be used? And most of the time it wasn't, because they were plugging the candidate by name. So I was nicking that stuff that was coming into the office and delivering it around Nottingham North.
Good. So Luke, who is an alumni of the show, he's been on before we got Martin, and is a county council candidate in Huntingdon or St Ives. I don't know where. Sorry, Luke. But he's not. He's a Labour candidate, but basically says Naomi is a lovely woman, and so we're talking about negativity in politics. But the truth is that behind the scenes, most of us are good mates, aren't they? I've been to football with Mark Goldsack a few times. He's a good lad, and I like most. And Simon Bywater as well. Love the guy, and quite often after I'll go and sit with those guys after the meetings for a chat, because I spend so much time around them that they're all lovely people.
I would agree, and I've always got on well with the Labour Party in Whittlesea. Historically, the Labour Party in Whittlesea was two people mainly, a guy called Dave Lewis and a guy called Jez Hibbert, and I've always got on well with them. I bump into him in the pub, we have a good chat, and whatever. Strawberry Day is the day when you meet all these people in Whittlesea. You should come down to Strawberry in January.
Let's do it.
But and that's how politics should be. It's okay to challenge, it's okay to be a bit robust. That's not the same as rude, and it's not the same as negative. But actually underneath that is what matters. And Simon Bywater, I think I've said this to you before, I used to talk about the sensible wing of UKIP when Simon was a UKIP member, and he was definitely a member of the sensible wing, which is why he ended up as part of the Conservative group.
And one of the most entirely reasonable parts. And I'm not sure if that's a comment on the Conservatives, but I don't disagree with Simon anything in local politics. So yeah,
you're not allowed to. He's an ex-booty.
He does Marine every single time. So it's well known. So Luke has just pointed. Luke is the official Labour candidate for Huntingdon North and Hertford in the county council elections. So
I did know that, because I've got work-related issues in Huntingdon North. So
so you'll be letting him know once he's elected. All right, shall we move on? So I've had a busy week this week, a really, really, really stupidly busy week of meetings. I had to represent some parishioners at DMC, which is the planning committee, which I struggle with as well, because I've done that a few times. Yeah, but if you're representing residents against officer recommendations, you look through the planning records, and it's almost like I think during this last few years, 100% of DMC decisions have gone with office recommendations, because it's really, really difficult for councillors to go against them, isn't it? It really is. I don't know what your experience in the past, but
No, it's very, very hard, and you know this is something I do for a living. There are ways you can deal with it. That it's the thing is, it's got to be evidence based.
Yeah.
So on planning, you know, you've got to do something that's evidence based, because just turning around and saying I know that junction, you know, or you know, I know this and that, when you've got basically professional highways officers and a planning team with a professional highways team sort of behind it as well on major applications.
I mean,
You've got to find the evidence. The way to do it is it's basically at parish council level, is for parish councils to employ people and to utilise people.
They did. This case, so it was Yelling Parish Council, and they employed a barrister to write their case for them. Didn't represent them at the meeting, because I think the chair of the parish council did a fantastic job. But in terms of preparing the objections, it was all based on the NPF, PPF, or whatever it's called, and you know, there were legitimate objections, but I mean, we didn't win, so. It's the way it goes, isn't it? So I had that Monday night, yeah, which is always. I mean, always happy to try and do that. Support my parish council.
It's worth saying, by the way, one of the things with this is, and it's worth bearing in mind, the planning department in Huntingdon, in my view, is really, really good. I do deal with them, and I do think they're really good. And you're lucky with that with Huntingdon, and it's one of the things that Huntingdon residents need to be wary of as we move towards local government reorganisation.
It's all going to change quite soon. So that was Monday night. Tuesday night I had like cabinet at HDC, yeah, and then Wednesday night we had full council and cabinet again to talk about national government, the local government reorganisation thing as well, which was an interesting meeting. And I had county council all day on Tuesday. It was like 7 hours, yeah, including about an hour and a half, I think, on LGR. And basically, the situation we're at is that we were invited. All the councils were invited to respond to the proposals with a deadline. Is it I'm not sure what deadline was, but a March deadline. Yeah, and then there's a today. So there's a November deadline.
March, yeah.
November deadline for kind of the final plans. And this was almost like the initial plans. And so what's the situation we're at? Is that, and we had the same debate. So the leaders of the 7 councils in Cambridgeshire, which I think includes Peterborough, I need to look at the letter again, have signed a letter together talking about kind of what we want to do in very, very broad terms with no specific details. And both county council.
I've just lost you.
You still there?
Yeah, I'm still there. Yeah, you're back again.
So county council, we voted whether we wanted to send this letter or not. So all the council leaders, all the 7 council leaders have come together and written this joint letter. The only one that doesn't want to sign it in its original form after a meeting last Friday is Fenland, and Fenland have asked for 2 extra sentences to put in, say that they're not in favour of any unitary proposal. That is a single unitary, so the whole of, you know, so all of the current combined authority councils being merged into a single unitary because it's too big. And Steve Count and some others spoke quite eloquently about how, you know, the needs of rural communities wouldn't be recognised by a massive mega council. And I'm kind of, it's a convenient solution for those of us who are part of Cambridgeshire, but I'm inclined to agree that the scale of that thing would be huge, yeah, and it would be a massive unitary authority, and I actually don't think it's probably on the cards. So Fenland have voted for that change, but everybody else has voted to basically say we're talking together and we're trying to be friends. And so at County Council there was kind of reluctant agreement, and then we had the same debate at District Council, and the opposition and some administration members and some people in my own group were a lot more critical and were suggesting that we were only one of 2 councils that don't have kind of more. We hadn't answered all the questions that the minister had set, and we didn't have any proposals and the kind of expectation that we should have had more developed proposals. So this whole thing started at Christmas, and we're now less than 3 months into it. And I didn't speak in the debate at District because I'm on cabinet and I didn't want to really speak twice, but I spoke in debate in cabinet, and so there was lots of criticism of our leader at HDC, Sarah Conboy, who's basically the one, you know, who's in the room when it happens, who sits around the table with the other leaders and trying to negotiate. And I think she's the one who convened the meetings with the other leader. And like my view on this is like, Well, the argument was everybody agrees this is happening too quickly. Yeah, it's a very, very quick thing. But also that we should be somehow at the same time we should be at the front of the chase for this. And I don't think it was contradictory that we're both moving too fast because we're being forced to move fast, but we should be, at the front of the race. I don't think that's a good argument. So, I think, go on.
Yeah, there's a couple of things with this. First thing is one of my concerns about Finland being an outlier and it's something that I feel Finland is guilty of quite a lot, is they're going to end up having this thing happen to them rather than with them.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about the Fens Reservoir as an example. The Fens Reservoir is not something that's happening with Finland. It's happening to them. And the reason for that is Finland are not being aggressive enough and challenging enough about what Finland wants out of it.
Yeah.
And sorry, I've diverted different topic, but I just feel the same thing with the unitary, and actually, if I was Sarah, right, you look at a map of Cambridgeshire and you can basically draw a line that's not quite north to south, that puts Huntingdon, Fenland, and Peterborough into one unitary, and the rest of the county into another one, right? And if I was in Sarah's shoes, I would be doing everything to avoid that. Is a reality, and if I was Sarah, I would be thinking I would much prefer a single county unitary than I would to be put into a Peterborough unitary.
So when that news of that letter, so the first time I'd heard the proposal there might be a single unitary was I heard like late last week that Fenland were objecting to a single unitary, and like my views were the same as yours. Yeah, out of all the bad possible scenarios, yeah, that's not the worst for Huntingdonshire and for St Neots, because it's kind of bit like we were before Peterborough left the county council. Yeah,
it's barking for Fenland not to want to be part of a single unitary. Single county unitary, in my view. I'm in favour of it. However, the numbers, 900,000, and when the government are talking about 500,000, and it's same again. If you take that north-south split, and you take Fenland, Huntingdonshire, and Peterborough, and then the rest of Cambridgeshire, you actually end up splitting the population quite evenly. So, there's all sorts of reasons why that happened. But parts of Fenland, Chatteris in particular, there's a great and easy travel to work route through to Cambridge and into the Cambridge economy. And so you would want your political focus to be part of, how does Chatteris sit in relation to that, and how does Chatteris benefit from the Cambridge economy, as much as Whittlesea needs to look at how we can benefit from the Peterborough economy. But they're both Fenland, so it makes sense for that to be part of a unitary. And the other thing that's important is the big cash cow in local government at the moment is social care.
Yeah,
and creating two councils to look after social care, when we currently have two councils looking after social care, means we're not saving money on that.
No, not at all. And that is the biggest expense, and the thing we can do least.
Yeah, and there's a reality, and there's also a reality that the government have kicked social care reform into the long grass again. My preference always has been, if we can do a single county unitary, we should. I just think it's unlikely, and
I think it's highly unlikely, and but and it's also, I think, ruling stuff out is a bit dumb in general, but they're doing it with good intentions. At the county council debate, his thing is that there was an expectation at HDC that we should have proposals ready, but then I sat through a hour and a half debate at county the day before, where, you know, some much bigger heavyweights in local politics, including mayoral candidate Lorna Dupre, stood up and talked about it, and there wasn't loads of proposals on the table. There's not like there's any one idea. Lorna talked passionately about how East Cam must be part of Greater Cambridgeshire because it only looks to Cambridge, and like that's exactly the same for St Neots, isn't it? You know, we've got great connections. We've got a train line to Cambridge. Well, St Neots will have a train line to Cambridge. Yeah, we've also got a very, very fast new road being built to Cambridge. We're part of the same economy. Yeah. So if there was what 54 different HCC councillors, there'll be like 50 different solutions, and so like we've got to come to a solution eventually. But I don't think I think that Sarah getting 7 leaders together, yeah, and getting them to sign a single letter in Cambridgeshire, you know how toxic that's been is an achievement in itself, isn't it? Yeah, and apparently, you know, they're cordial relationships. Everybody's getting on, and we just have to look at the data because we don't have much data on this as well about kind of the economic and social deprivation stuff. We need to get a consistent set of data, and if you look at data enough, then difficult decisions sometimes make themselves. And so there isn't going to be a solution that suits everybody. But also, I don't think we're nowhere near getting a solution so far. And I don't.
Here's the thing about not having solutions ready. I mean, I get the point about government rushing this through, and I do understand it. But there's also an argument to say that that everything we do in this country is too slow.
And so I also said that in the debate at cabinet, and I said, actually, you know, quite often I didn't swear at cabinet, obviously, but we just get shit done, man. Yeah, talking about stuff for years and years and years, it never happening. Now, 1974 was disaster, which we're still paying the price of. Yeah, if you go into the ops office in St Neots Town Council and seeing where the town council has to mow grass and the district council has to, like, different sides of the same road, it's like a patchwork quilt of no sense at all. These are the sort of things that you don't know who owns all the lampposts.
So I'm going to push back on this. Is that a fault of the 1974 review? Or is that a fault of local government for not getting its shit together and sorting it out?
Yeah, probably. But there are unresolved issues.
They've had 50 years to get that sorted.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. And it's also been used as an argument for not splitting.
Use my language, by the way.
Yeah, it's fine.
But yeah, I mean,
not splitting authorities as well, and basically the everybody seems to be thinking about taking districts in as whole chunks and merge them into a number of authorities. I think that if there is a consensus, it's that if any district is going to be split in Cambridgeshire, it's probably going to be Huntingdonshire. Yeah, and I'm not sure how much opposition there would be amongst Huntingdonshire district councillors either, because I mean, you know, my views are quite clearly that same as Lorna Dupre is that St Neots is part of the Cambridge economy and should be an important part of the Cambridge economy. Yeah, and we're a very, very long way from Wisbech.
I broadly agree. You know, you look at places like Yaxley is the best example. You know, Yaxley naturally belongs to Peterborough. So if you're going to split it into two, Yaxley should be part of a Peterborough unitary. And I think splitting Huntingdonshire into two makes a lot of sense. I think I've said that on here before. But here's the point and the challenge from me. Okay, we're not in a position to make recommendations now, but what is going to change between now and November?
More data, more analysis, more conversations. I guess it's difficult because it's one of those room where it happens. You know, it's not a decision that's going to be made by councils. It's going to be made by cabinets and actually primarily by the leaders who are in the room making those discussions. My ability to influence it from the outside is incredibly limited. You know, it really is.
No, I agree, but listen, come November, East Cams are still not going to want to be part of a Peterborough unitary. They're going to be wanting part of a Greater Cambridge unitary.
Yeah.
Come November, Fenland's position about a single unitary is not going to change. The only thing that might change is the Huntingdonshire thing.
Yeah. And what you're saying about Fenland, I mean, we can go with it and we can accept these easy solutions. But as elected representatives, part of me wants to rage against the machine and say I'm not going to walk blindly into being part of Greater Fenland. Not that Fenland's not great, because it is, and it's a long way from here. Yeah, and there's various councils have got various strange jobs.
Finland is a magnificent place, but Finland is not well led.
Can I just say one other thing that happened in debate as well, which is quite outrageous. So at the debate, the former leader of the Conservatives at HTC, Jonathan, basically said he did a big diatribe about the fact that Finland and Whittlesea, he said they're probably great places, but he never goes to them. So we need to get Jonathan out in Whittlesea for a night out, I think. So show him what a great place it is. I've not been drinking in Whittlesea, to be fair, but I did open the Ralph Butcher Bridge and went to Whittlesea then, so it seemed fantastic from that high elevation.
Well, you stood on the edge of Whittlesea, did you? Well done.
Looked over from on high. Now working.
Yeah, well, open invite to anybody that's come and have a beer in Whittlesea. We've got some nice places to drink, nice places to eat. Yeah, we can do that. That's we should do that. But I do think people sitting around a table, and Sarah deserves credit for doing that, by the way. For making that happen. Is there, but somebody needs to have an honest conversation and say what's going to change. What are and what isn't going to change, and use that as a basis to make some recommendations and make them early.
Yeah, and I do agree. It starts with a straw man, doesn't it? You have to draw some lines on the map eventually and say, like, this is our proposal. What do you think about it? And you have to do that quite soon, I guess, because otherwise, nothing's going to change. So somebody's got to draw some lines eventually. So
the other thing that I'm also wary of in this is there are two things. There's a natural geopolitical thing that says this is how a split should happen sort of naturally, but there's an overtly political thing underneath it. And I wonder if, because I know what Finland's like, and it's politics first, Finland second, is how much of Finland are looking at huge conservative majority in Finland, a narrow political balance in Peterborough, and therefore Conservatives becoming part of from Finland becoming part of a Peterborough unitary basically gives Conservatives control in Peterborough. And I bet that Finland's stance is largely based on that. I would bet you bottom dollar.
Yeah, but I think that's going to be true along almost all of the authorities. And actually, the exception is actually Huntingdonshire, isn't it? Because there isn't a single political flavour in Huntingdonshire. We've got a joint administration. Like South Cambs is nearly all Lib Dem. Yeah, Cambridge is mostly Labour, with the Greens and Lib Dems chewing at the edges. And East Cambs and Fenland are both Conservative, and I guess Peterborough just swings these days, isn't it, backwards and forwards? But people will be trying to put their own gerrymandering their own political parties' futures, and I think that's naive, because in the past, Cambridge hasn't always been Labour; it's been Lib Dem recently. It used to have more Tories before. Yeah, in the future, I predict there's going to be more Greens there as well, and so this is only a point in time, and trying to make decisions based on our current political. I think the swings across the last 5 years since when Nick was, or 4 years when Nick was elected, it's been huge.
I think as far as Finland's concerned, it's be careful what you wish for, because the reason the Conservatives do so well in Finland is basically because the political structures of the other parties have fallen apart, and there's no sort of coherent offer from Lib Dems, Labour, Greens. I think Reform seem to have got their act together, and they seem to be well organised in Finland. But there's a reality around that, which is that if and when Finland become part of a Peterborough unitary, those other political parties are going to realise that if they are going to maintain their majorities, they have got to get structure and organisation in Finland. And if that happens, the Conservatives will take a hit. Yeah. How big a hit is another matter, but they will take a hit.
Well, I think the part of the issue in Finland is, I think it was the problem in Huntingdonshire before as well, is that there's not a credible opposition, and I think that politics depends on a couple of things, and one of which is having a good administration is important, but having a good opposition to challenge them is really important too. It doesn't feel like the opposition at county council is great. Although Steve Count is a great scrutineer, probably the best that I know. So maybe that's not entirely fair. Huntingdonshire, we've got a good opposition, I think, who pushed the administration in a respectful way. But in places where you don't have that, you've got all the councillors from one side. And I think being on town council when it was all independent was a bit like this too. So you don't get the scrutiny, you don't get the breadth of thinking, you don't get the challenge. And so I think that's the issue, is trying to establish, if you can't, a decent opposition in these places is the first stage before you get the change.
Yeah, I said when I went to watch a council meeting at Huntingdon for work, I remember chatting to Tim and talking to him about the fact that I was really impressed by the approach that the Conservatives took to opposition in Huntingdonshire, and it made the council tick better, and I think there's not enough of that, actually. I think they do it well. They did challenge, they did scrutinise, but it was very respectful. It wasn't a lot of yaboo and stuff like that, but the scrutiny and the challenge was there, and I thought it worked really well. And councils do need that, and Fenland is a worse place. I'm trying to find the right way. Fenland is a worse place for not having a good opposition. It's a much, much worse place because the way the Conservatives are allowed to ride roughshod over Fenland in the way they do. And I say that as an ex-Conservative at Fenland, and it was the case when I was a councillor as well. It doesn't do Fenland justice. It needs something as a restraining influence on the worst aspects of conservatism, and you could say the same about socialism as well. And a conservative opposition constrains the worst aspects of socialism, but it's desperately needed, and that's the bit. That's one of the reasons why I'm a fan of PR. And here's a question: when the letter goes in November, or before, if they can do it, what's to say that the letter shouldn't say we would like to elect our councillors by proportional representation?
Yeah, I'll mention it to Sarah. the Lib Dems are always going to say yes to that, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, and the Greens. As an independent, I'm still remain to be convinced, but it probably won't be that important for me by that stage. One final thing. So I talked earlier, just a few seconds ago, about how having a decent opposition is an important part of democracy and local democracy. What's even more important is having scrutiny from the free press. And I'm really sad this week is that John Elworthy is hanging up his boots. He's saying he's hanging up his boots and he's retiring. Yeah, because John, has been incredible, hasn't he, for local democracy reporting? Not always uncontroversially on your side of the political spectrum.
No, absolutely. I've always got on with John, and we've had our spats, me and John, in the past. I remember making a complaint against John about something he said to me on Twitter once. But I've always got on well with him because I know that he's a traditional journalist, and I respect what his role is as a traditional journalist. He's never been afraid to get under the radar and and really get into the detail and challenge and push. And it's the same again. The Conservatives in Fenland, too many of them just think he's anti-conservative. He's not. He's just a bloody good journalist. And and when he set up Cam's News, they were calling him a mini blogger and all sorts of stuff, and being detrimental. Cambridgeshire will be a worse place for not having John actively pushing and scrutinising, because local media just does not do that enough nowadays. And politics is worse off for it. And I agree with you. John's not going away. I've just, I saw this week 2 really, really long tweets that he put out that suggest to me that, it's going to be John as an independent, just as an independent citizen, just tweeting stuff about about local politics, and doing some very, very long posts on, well, Twitter or X, whichever you want to call it. But he will absolutely be a loss.
Well,
and the fact that a lot of our councillors in Fenland won't agree with me means I'm almost certainly right.
Yeah. I've never been on the wrong side of him. I don't think I've never fallen foul of his journalism, which is lucky on my. I don't really get involved in.
I mean, I was a county council leader. I was an active councillor. And there's no way of, I could avoid scrutiny, and no way I should. I used to push back with him a little bit as well. Sure. And when he really gave me a hard time, I probably deserved it, to be fair. Yeah, and I think that about most of the stuff that he pushes in. You think about the Farmgate stuff.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, that is the Watergate of local political reporting, isn't it? In terms of it changed everything. And the fact. So I won my county council seat by 9 votes. Yeah, right. I'd like to think that most of those 9 votes are based on me, but that Farmgate stuff was floating around at the time and was a huge scandal, and rightly a huge scandal. Yeah. And that was completely uncovered and reported by John in a way that it was accessible to general because the sort of stuff that even as a councillor would have escaped me, because I'm not good enough scrutineer to be able to do that stuff. So John, uncovering that and reporting it, despite all the restrictions and all the kind of pushback from the administration at the time, was fabulous and completely changed the face of Cambridgeshire politics. We wouldn't have had the joint administration.
When I was going through as a councillor the supermarket farce in Whittlesea, which was a story in itself. The one thing, because I was pushing against the administration in Fenland on that in a big way, and really, really coming under some horrific challenge and push for me to back off, and I could talk about why that is all day and all night. John was sat in the middle of that, and actually having a journalist who was willing to look at the issues rather than the personalities was really, really helpful as well. And it probably lessened some of the hassle I got, because what I did get during that was, I have to say, was dreadful. I was pushing against not just councillors, but I was pushing against the party machine on that, and it was really, really difficult. And just because I chose to stand up for what I believe to be right, and doing it in the only way I know, which is pretty robustly. And that's a reality. And John was great through that as well. And that's the thing. Farmgate is probably the most important thing that John did in this area in politics, but it's certainly not the only sort of mini scandal that he's uncovered, not by a long way. No. And he deserves absolute credit for it. And if there's any other local journalists watching this, be like John.
There's fewer and fewer of them, and that's a huge problem. Although luckily we still have a couple left. Hannah Brown, who I think she does Associated Press stuff. She's in all of the papers, but does a really good job of scrutinising local government. But and there's people like Dan Mason on the radio who do it as well. But they're few and far between, and it's essential. It's essential to be reporting all that goes on in councils. That's why one of the reasons why people are so disaffected by democracy is they don't know what's going on anymore, and it needs people like John and Hannah to shine a light on us.
So when you come to Whittlesea for a drink, we can have a drink with John.
Absolutely, and John has said he'll come on here as well. So we need to do that in the next couple of weeks. Right, I need to go to work now, fella. Otherwise, I'll be on the job.
Shocking. Priorities.
Lovely talking to you. I think we just sat here.
Wrap up with 2 points. A couple of things. Just to wrap up a couple of things we said about the election expenses thing. So apparently, the Greens spent £1,425 in their campaign in St Neots.
Right. So given that, I I got 2,941 votes. Yeah, Catherine got 2,663. Spent 10% of what I spent as well. So so she did better than me, really.
So maybe we should make democracy about we let the candidate who got the most votes per pound.
Yeah. It would be that, wouldn't it? It would be that.
Yeah. Apparently, that's less than the Party of Women candidate spent. So yeah, credit to them for that. And the other thing, just a comment in here, and I think this is a nice way of wrapping it up. This is from Jan Dobson, but says either way, it's a scandal. Whether overspent or incorrectly declared, election spend limits are important, and there for a reason, and already put larger parties at an advantage. Agreed. Rules are rules, and administrators should be capable of filling in a form which does not exactly require the intelligence of a rocket scientist. What does it say about their ability to budget for an authority otherwise? They should have the book thrown at them.
Yeah, I can imagine him making a small mistake, but I can't imagine a mistake of that magnitude. I just can't. But we'll have to see anyway. It's only an allegation in the press, but it has been reported, so we'll have to see how it works out.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I know what I'm going to be thinking about today and doing. So on my social media, look forward to that. All right, guys. So I think we should sack the other two and just do me and you now, mate. So we're better by ourselves, aren't we?
We're absolutely not. We're absolutely not. Yeah.
All right. So see you next week. Hopefully with the better two people on next week. See you later, everyone. Bye.
Cheers.
Probably the most famous train in the world. Listen to that.
We're in D, aren't we? Did you say, Philip?
Should we go in?
Right.
Harry wants to see the blue one.